Nicholas I came to power after successfully suppressing the Freemason liberal Decembrist revolution. He came from the Russian bourgeoisie conservative camp who were imposing liberalism, based on social views and religion, but shared the same bourgeoisie intent as many of the liberals and despised the Russian feudalism and were intended on advancing a newly established mode of production of capitalism within Russia. Being the Russian Tsar triggered a wave of liberals opposing him, taking to the streets, who wanted Russia to become a liberal bourgeois monarchy like many of the Western monarchies at the time. The Baltic German officer Alexander von Beckenkopf was appointed for the personal security of the emperor. Nicholas implemented the bourgeois capitalist centralism and removed the local autonomy in many regions of Russia, such as Bessarabia. He also removed the autonomy of Jewish-dominated regions within Russia. And due to the capitalist boom in Russia and the accumulation of capital after the fall of feudalism, large infrastructure projects such as the St. Petersburg-Moscow Railway could be implemented. Nicholas implemented conservative reactionary ideologies such as the so-called Orthodox unity, which sought to transform the Russian feudal institutions into capitalist institutions, and wanted to implement the bourgeois satanic orthodox of the Russian Orthodox Church on the Christian masses, which failed, as seen later. The emperor's chief ideologue was the bourgeois Orthodox conservative nationalist Sergei Uvarov. This bourgeois orthodoxy and bourgeois conservatism, which was implemented by the emperor, also sought rise to anti-Semitic policies discriminating Russian Jews and excluding them from the Russian population. Another chief ideologue was Vasily Zhukovsky, who wanted to exclude Russian minorities from the Russian population and ban local dialects, forcing Russian language upon all peoples of Russia. Many independent thinkers and proletarian movements were suppressed, such as Alexander Pushkin. He refused to implement progressive ideas as to not anger Russian nobles, such as to abolish serfdom. This idea was only thought about in the context of introducing capitalist wage labor replacing serfdom. Pavel Kiselyov, although wanted to improve the conditions of state-owned serf, he also attempted to unite to untie serfs from their land and attempt to privatize Russian land, waging a war against landowners relying on serfs. He cucked out to the Polish Russophobic imperialists and let himself be crowned King of Poland. Many Slavic nationalist movements countering this bourgeois nationalist conservatism arose, calling for a system of production based on Slavic culture and who were against capitalism or Western values. Due to capitalism, the Russian intellectual class and academia flourished, resulting in a renaissance of Russian literature, led by Alexander Pushkin, Nikolai Gogol, Ivan Turgenev, who until this day are famous around the world and whose works have changed global literature forever. The Russian ballet gained steam and became an important cultural event within Russia, with many famous composers such as Mikhail Glinka gained popularity in this era. German bourgeois scientist Alexander von Humboldt, after the abolition of feudalism, was invited to Russia to evaluate its mineral resources, resulting in the finding of diamonds in the Ural Mountains. Anti-Semitic policies were introduced as part of the Russian bourgeoisie conservatism, forcibly recruiting Jewish boys into the Russian army. For example, also it was attempted to Russify Jewish practices, banning the Talmud and other Jewish literature. And Nicholas was engaging in aggressive bourgeois imperialist foreign policy. He continued occupying Poland, but was unable to suppress the bourgeois Freemason revolts, such as the surge led in 1834, led by Napoleonic Polish generals, even leading to Russian army detachments getting defeated by revoltists due to them being led by an incompetent German general, Friedrich Caspar von Geismar. Polish General Joseph Zwernicki even went on to recruit Ukraine nationalists when he was admitted into Ukraine by the Austrian Empire. Ivan Paskevich, who was part of the group of Russian proletarian nationalists among the Imperial Army, who were highly critical of the emperor, um, led the Russian army into victory, leading to the bourgeois revolt being suppressed at the Battle of Warsaw. Ivan Paskevich, this revolt was caused by Russian state agencies not cracking down on Polish nationalism and Austrian-supported Freemasons carrying out terrorism in regions. The emperor even put a special decree ordering no one of the Council of Generals to be arrested, a group of which every single Polish revoltist took part in. The revolt was part of. The emperor was a conservative reactionary, and despite the Austrians aiding him, he aided them in suppressing the Hungarian independence movement. The emperor sided with the Greeks in their fight for independence to weaken the Ottoman Empire. The Slavic occupation of Greece by the Ottoman imperialists was ended with that. This was an essential step and morally just one. It's also important to know that this step was most likely only taken due to the Greek revolutionaries being reactionary bourgeois conservatives aligning with the values of the Tsar. The Persian Khazars, propped up by the British and invaded Russia-held regions by being invaded Russian-held territory in the Caucasus. Incoming Russian reinforcements pushed the Persians out of Armenia, and the Russians launched a counter-offensive into Persian territory to neutralize the Persian army. Persians again irreversibly lost control over the Caucasus and were defeated by the Russian army. This bourgeois foreign anti-domestic policy resulted in the final and non-reversible defeat of Russian feudalism, Slavic nationalism, and the Old Russia. Ivan Grozny and Peter the Great and the defeat of the Old Russia of Ivan Grozny and Peter the Great and his predecessors' actions were what resulted in the collapse of the Russian Empire and the proletarian revolution. Social inequality and the disillusionment of the Russian nobles with the Russian masses, acceleration of reactionary policies, rise of the left wing and proletarian movements, in even more anti-proletarian crackdown. So if you don't want to miss me talking about all of this, subscribe. Next week we'll talk about Alexander II, who, even though being a reactionary conservative, almost aiming to introduce some vague proletarian strain, but we'll talk about it next week. Bye bye.